In this special broadcast, we will have experts discuss the merits of capture and release across Canada and the role zoonotic diseases and climate change play. To start, I'm going to provide some basic background information regarding capture, mark, and release. Every year, millions of wild animals are captured for a variety of reasons. These reasons could be damage and disease control programs, population regulation, wildlife management efforts, and research studies. In most cases, once the animals are captured, they receive some kind of mark or tagging to allow researchers to identify or monitor the individuals. These marking techniques commonly include tattoos, ear tags, or collars, and then the animals are released back into their environment. This is often referred to as capture, mark, release. However, there are some issues with these techniques that have been brought forth by the Canadian Council on Animal Care, CCAC. These groups oversee the care and use of wildlife. A main concern held by the CCAC is to ensure that animals' pain and distress are being monitored during and directly after the capture process. In Canada, capture, mark, and release is regulated through municipal, provincial, territorial, and federal legislation. Different forms of capture that are often utilized include by hand, mechanical traps, remote injection of drugs, or drugs placed in baits. Those doing the capturing need to ensure the method of capture they use is going to be effective as well as decrease the stress the animal will experience and prevent the chances of injuries. Also important to not capture animals that are not supposed to be captured, which can sometimes occur using methods like mechanical traps and drugs placed in baits. As mentioned, common forms used to mark wildlife include ear tags, tattoos, with identification numbers, and collars which can provide up-to-date and continual information. Any form of mark that is applied to the wildlife should not hinder their lifestyle. The telemetry collar needs to be applied not too tight in order to allow growth, but also not too loose that it will get caught on objects. It also has a feature in it that over time it will rot away and fall off. Releasing the animal after being captured and marked, it is important to release them in a safe area. It often takes animals a few moments to regain their bearings. Especially in the case where drugs were used, it is important for individuals to remain observing the animal from a safe distance to ensure the animal is alert and in overall good health. In the circumstances where an animal or animals need to be released into a new location, individuals must ensure that they can be successful there.
We've got a eye cover on him here to keep him calm if he keeps from coming out and to keep his eyes from being hurt from the sunlight and not being able to blink much.
In addition, the radio-collared wolves will lead researchers to den sites. This is important for documenting wolf reproduction.
I do an aerial flight every month, so I'll get a location from the air.
Then Lucid uses this information to hike in on the area.
And hopefully these radio collars will lead me to their pups and let me count how many pups that they have and determine if this pack is reproduced this year.
The wolf's general health is assessed, measurements are taken, and then it's fitted with ear tags and a radio collar. Now it's time for him to join his pack mates.
So I like to give the reversal just under the tongue here.
Lucid and Netto watch the animal as it wakes up to make sure it's not hurt. The wolf staggers about as he recovers before finally getting his legs under him. Eventually, he disappears among the trees. Steve Liebenthal, Idaho Fish and Game.
Today, animals are being forced to be captured, often marked, and released somewhere new as they find themselves in more urban areas, where they can become a nuisance to the humans and pets around them and can carry dangerous diseases. Joe is a specialist when it comes to zoonotic diseases.
Thanks, Sara. Yes. Contact with wildlife poses a serious threat for people and their domestic animals. Zoonotic diseases. These are diseases that can infect and spread between different species. Zoonotic diseases can be transmitted through bites, scratches, and bodily fluids. Inanimate objects such as clothes, equipment, food, and water can also carry infectious agents.
We also have Carolyne with us. Carolyne is an expert on climate change and the effects climate change can have on wildlife.
Canada has seen long-term shifts in regional climate patterns. According to Environment Canada, this includes substantial annual temperature rise, The greatest changes are seen in the western provinces and northern territories. The Gulf Stream has mitigated some of the effects of terrestrial climate change on the Atlantic provinces. From 2007 to 2020, there have been drastic changes in where and when drought conditions are listed as moderate or extreme. In 2007, areas of concern were mostly focused along the 48th parallel, the Canadian-US border, or southern Ontario. In 2020, areas of drought ranged from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in the east to the Northwest Territories and the Yukon in the west. Habitat loss from forest fires, urban expansion, and drought are factors that push wildlife into close encounters with humans. Climate change may not be as easy to pinpoint, but as climates change, so do the dangers and challenges of preserving Canada's wildlife populations.
Jen will be discussing the role of capture and release for animals in residential areas.
As communities expand, more and more animals are making their way into residential areas. Raccoons, squirrels, and skunks, among other wildlife, are making homes in urban areas. This leads to problems when wildlife make homes in someone's backyard, under their porches, or even in the walls or the attic of the house. Often the animal would be considered a nuisance for foraging for food in garbage cans or finding shelter too close to the human population, when in reality the animal is just trying to survive. When an animal is being considered a nuisance, some people will look into capture and release. However, capture and release laws throughout Canada vary greatly from province to province. Some provinces don't have any official laws at all, while in others, violation of the capture and release laws or improper use of live traps can lead to animal cruelty charges.
Now to go to Joe to provide some expert opinion on zoonotic diseases that can arise in these residential areas.
One of the reasons people need to be careful when capturing live animals is the risk of a rabies infection.
Rabies is caused by rabies lyssavirus, which can infect all mammals. The virus infects the nervous system that ends up in the saliva and is transmitted by biting. Rabies infections can appear in two forms. Furious form is characterized by hyperactivity, aggression, confusion, and anxiety. Paralytic or dumb form is rare and presents with weakness and paralysis. There is an effective vaccine for rabies, but diagnosis is difficult. Symptoms appear up to 3 months after infection, which is too late for treatment. Raccoons are a well-known residential nuisance in many urban, suburban, and rural areas. They root through garbage, make nests in people's homes, and can transmit zoonotic diseases while doing so. Leptospira bacteria in an infected raccoon's urine can spread through contaminated water and cause leptospirosis. Humans are often asymptomatic or have flu-like symptoms. However, dogs and livestock can become severely ill with fever, shivering, jaundice, loss of appetite, lethargy, and hemorrhaging. Raccoons can also carry Giardia duodenalis in the small intestine, which are single-cell parasites that cause giardiasis. The parasites travel to potential hosts from contact with fecal contamination. Animals and humans are usually asymptomatic, but can develop severe intermittent diarrhea. Coyotes are a common sight across rural Canada and are pushing into suburban and urban areas. Coyotes can have sarcoptic mange, or scabies, caused by the itch mite. The itch mite travels to new hosts from contact with infected skin. Symptoms of scabies are hair loss, intense itchiness, and scaly crust. Scratching often leads to secondary skin wounds and infections. Coyotes are also reservoirs for heartworms that are transmitted from mosquito bites. These threadworms infest heart and lung tissue and release eggs into the bloodstream. A mosquito can ingest the eggs and then inject them into a new host. Humans are generally asymptomatic, but dogs and cats develop coughing, dyspnea, exercise intolerance, lethargy, weight loss, and eventually congestive heart failure.
Now let's take a deeper look at individual provinces' laws and regulations concerning capture and release. Ontario has the most amount of laws, regulations, and penalties surrounding capture and release. According to the Ministry of Natural Resources Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act, it is illegal to relocate an animal more than 1 kilometer away from where they were captured in Ontario. Inappropriate use of live traps can result in a $130,000 fine for first-time offenders, up to 2 years in jail, and potentially a lifetime ban on animal ownership under the Ontario Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act. And for the other provinces, you might ask, well, in Quebec, no person may kill or capture an animal, even if the animal is being destructive, unless otherwise determined by the minister. In New Brunswick, capture and release of wildlife is allowed, but there are some regulations on which traps should be used for what animal. For example, bobcats should be caught with light-hold traps. In Saskatchewan and the Northwest Territories, there is plenty of regulation surrounding capture and release of fish, but not much regulation protecting general wildlife. There are no distinct laws or regulations protecting general wildlife from capture and release in the Yukon, Nunavut, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, Prince Edward Islands, Nova Scotia, Alberta, British Columbia, or Newfoundland and Labrador. These laws concerning capture and release throughout the country need to be more coherent. Why is it that in Ontario it is illegal to relocate an animal more than 1 kilometer from where they're captured, but in Nova Scotia it is recommended to relocate an animal at least 10 kilometers from where they were captured? We need to consider the potential cruelty, stress, and injury to the animal, as well as the potential young left behind and other complications that come along with unregulated capture and release throughout Canada.
Rachel is our resident expert on wildlife that are the common subjects of capture, mark, and release.
In Canada, there are various species of animals that are captured, marked, and released for research purposes. The primary reason for researching wildlife in Canada stems from conservation and the research of various diseases, including zoonotic diseases. Common examples of species involved in this process include birds, which are tagged with bands, and turtles, which may be tagged with shell notching or electronically tagged with a microchip. Other species that are often captured, marked, and released within Canada include reptiles, amphibians, and mammals, many of which are greatly endangered.
Northern Canada is seeing an increase on average of 2.3 degrees annually. This, coupled with water shortages during the hottest months, has led to some of the largest habitat loss from wildfires in our nation's history. Saskatchewan's Ministry of Environment warns of an increased risk of wildfires due to climate change. The Fort McMurray fire destroyed 522,895 hectares of boreal forest. In 2020, the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre reported that 3,873 fires had burned a total of 1.8 million hectares of land. This is down from 6,444 million hectares in 2019, but on par with what was seen in 2018. Wildlife Preservation Canada works to ensure endangered species are managed and reintroduced to wild ecosystems where habitat protection is not sufficient. Almost all the mammals in the conservation program are from the mountain Pacific coast or the prairie regions.
The burrowing owl is considered one of Canada's conservation success stories. However, it is still an endangered species that is at threat of losing its habitat, as its shortgrass prairie homes are converted for crop production. The burrowing owl requires vast open spaces with low ground cover in order to hunt for their prey.
Other pathogens shared by many animals in Canada are vector-borne. This means they are carried by a specific agent, usually an insect. Transmission occurs when an infected insect bites the animal, which allows the microorganism to enter the body. The most common vectors are ticks, flies, and mosquitoes.
Ticks are mainly found on long grass and brush during the spring and summer months all over Canada. They can parasitize a variety of mammals. The deer tick is the main vector of Borrelia burgdorferi, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. They can also spread babesiosis from the pyroplasmid blood parasite Babesia microti. Another tick, the American dog tick, can spread Rocky Mountain spotted fever, caused by Rickettsia rickettsii bacteria. Tick-borne diseases usually present with fever, lameness, arthritis, and lethargy.
Another important climate aspect is the drastic reduction in sea ice, which is causing animals such as polar bears that depend on it for their food to venture into communities where they may interact with domestic animals and people.
I'm in Churchill, Manitoba. Just a few days before we got here, a polar bear attacked and badly mauled 2 people right in front of this blue house. Churchill bills itself as the polar bear capital of the world, and it depends on income from tourists coming here to see the polar bears. At the same time, scientists are predicting that polar bears are going to come off the ice earlier and hungrier because of climate change, and there's going to be more of these kinds of attacks.
As seen in the video, it is not unheard of for bears to wander into town, interacting with the people and the animals living there. This can facilitate many potential zoonotic exposures.
Bears can carry bacteria that cause brucellosis. Brucellosis is spread from ingesting cysts in raw meat and from fecal contamination. Symptoms include joint pain, muscle pain, night sweats, genital inflammation, and even abortion. Bears can also carry trichinella roundworms in muscle tissue that causes trichinosis. Trichinosis is asymptomatic in animals, but can cause intestinal upset, facial swelling, fever, and muscle pain in humans. Deer are another frequent sight in the Canadian wilderness. They are a popular hunting prey, mark and recapture target, and rural intruder. As herbivores, they are less threatening, but still carry zoonotic diseases. Deer can have heart and lung infections of Coxiella burnetii, the bacteria that causes Query fever. Q fever is airborne and usually has flu-like symptoms, but can cause abortion in pregnant animals from fluid buildup in the womb. Deer can also spread the fungal disease cryptococcosis from airborne spores of Cryptococcus neoformans. Cryptococcosis mainly affects immunocompromised people and causes fever, fatigue, dry cough, and headache. It is also a common deep tissue fungal disease in animals that presents with dyspnea, nasal discharge, eye inflammation, and seizures.
Though many wild animals can spread disease, they do so unknowingly and must be shown compassion. Improper handling can cause stress, injury, impede rehabilitation, affect research, and further spread disease. Aggressive conflict resolution often needlessly endangers their offspring and does not address environmental factors that led to intrusion in the first place. Limiting zoonotic spread requires proper handling, sanitation protocols, and effective medication. Further research is required as many bacteria and viruses do not have effective vaccines. Distributing further vaccinations will require range data and ecological research to bait drop the correct host, much like how rabies is vaccinated today.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you gained something from this broadcast on wildlife and the impact climate change and zoonotic diseases has on capture, mark, and release programs.